Good morning again, gentlemen. It's great to see you this morning, as I said a couple of moments ago. Today I'm very pleased to be in conversation with you. So you'll notice that we have microphones up here. The idea is to be engaged with you and in conversation with you on the topic of a Crown Forum conversation about the complication of your freedom work. We're going to kind of unpack that a little bit. And we're fortunate today to have in conversation with us Dr. Hideko Serra, Dr. Tricia Hendrickson, and Dr. Kendrick Brown, the provost of Morehouse College. I'm going to do some light introductions of them, and then as we're in conversation, we'll unpack kind of who they are and why the significance of liberal arts education is worth putting center for you to grapple with and to consider in this kind of rarefied space where we look at issues and contexts of social justice and social impact. So, by way of these introductions, first I'd like to welcome Dr. Hideko Serra. Dr. Serra is the college's Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. She has taught, trained, and advocated for health equity for over 2 decades and has been recognized widely for her work, notably as the 2021 APA Presidential Citation Award, and this summer won the Board of Directors Member at Large position for the American Psychological Association. Dr. Serra, welcome. Next, we have Dr. Tricia Hendrickson. Dr. Hendrickson is a professor of biology here at Morehouse and is also the Associate Provost for Research and Training. She received her BS in biology from the University of the Virgin Islands and her PhD in cell biology from Emory University. And I just wanted to say this part. Her research interests include molecular insights into gamma-gamma tubulin lateral intersections within the gamma-gamma tubulin ring complex. I mean, that's what she does. A round of applause for Dr. Hendrickson. And lastly, we have our provost, our chief academic officer here at Morehouse College, Dr. Kendrick Brown. The title is officially Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs. Dr. Brown received his bachelor's in psychology from Mount Union College in Ohio and his PhD in psychology from the University of Michigan. He's spent 20 years as a professor and a senior administrator at liberal arts colleges on the West Coast and in the Midwest, and now in the South. Dr. Kendrick Brown, welcome. And I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. So my name is David Wall-Rice. I'm a professor of psychology here at Morehouse College and am over Crown Forum. So it's a pleasure to see you as always. I think we have to share mics, so that mic's on good, so we'll do this. So look, the first thing that I think of, and this is kind of open to whoever would care to lean in first, but why are we having this conversation? Right? The idea is that we are in Crown Forum. We know Crown Forum is central to looking at social justice, servant leadership examples. So why is it that we're carving time out to talk about a liberal arts institution or Morehouse as a liberal arts college? I mean, it seems weird. We know where we're at school, Provost.
So where this is beginning for me is I had a conversation this summer with Dr. Serra, and also a number of you will perhaps recall from the opening conversation or opening convocation. I've talked about the importance of Morehouse being not only an HBCU, but also being a liberal arts institution. And to me, a liberal arts education, especially for Black men, is about liberation. It is about being able to make connections. It's about being able to communicate. It's about being able to be a team member and think critically, because there are so many different forces in our world that it's too easy to just accept them as they are. So, a liberal arts education, if we don't emphasize that and the tradition that we have here at Morehouse of being that kind of institution, I think we miss a lot of what Morehouse is about. I think it's extremely important, of course, that we're an HBCU, but it's equally important to recall being a liberal arts college means that it's more than just about checking off boxes. It's about being of that intellectual tradition and being able to follow through on those commitments made by our institution.
But what does that mean? So a liberal art, what's the difference between going to a liberal arts college that is Morehouse and going to the Mecca, which is Howard University, which is not a liberal arts college, but it's good. I mean, I have a couple of degrees from Howard. It's all.
I'm not going to cast any aspersions on other institutions.
No aspersions to be cast at all. No, not at all.
But what I am going to say is this: because all of you are undertaking a liberal arts education, you can think both deeply related to a particular discipline, but you can also think broadly. You can think not just in terms of science, but you can think in terms of art, and you can think in terms of literature. You can look at the world from multiple perspectives and be able to understand it and make connections in a way that other folks who don't receive this education may not be able to do. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't make you better, but it does mean you have some dimensions to your understanding and how you engage with the world because of this education you're getting. So I would offer, because of the fact that Morehouse is a liberal arts institution, engaging in liberation of mind and the opportunity for folks to go deep and broad, you get to see the world in a way and make connections in a way that other folks may not have an opportunity. Not only that, you get to engage them. You get to engage your community in a way that helps not only yourself, but others as well.
All right, so that sounds good. You're my boss. You're the provost. Okay, so that's good. But let me talk to someone, the biologist, right? You're a psychology background, and so you're leaning into philosophy and ideas of the mind and things like that. But for somebody who's looking at gamma rings, all right, can you talk to us from a biological perspective, from a science perspective? What's the benefit of a liberal arts education? And we're talking about this idea of liberation. I really appreciated what Provost Brown said at our opening convocation, where he's talking about a liberal arts education liberating us. But I mean, just being a black doctor is liberation enough? I mean, how do we think about going deeper, like Provost Brown says, in a space like science where it seems like, it's kind of narrowcast? So let's just rock with what's there.
So I think it's a matter of perspective. And from a scientific standpoint, yes, we want to focus on the science, the how, the why, but also with an eye towards the application. And so we are not engaged in science for the simple exercise of being engaged in science, but we're engaged in science so that we can affect better outcomes. And so when we ask the question, better outcomes, it's always better outcomes for whom? Mm-hmm. And I think having a liberal arts perspective allows you to tap into that part of your educational training that gives you that perspective, that sensitivity to other areas that exist outside of the sciences. And so you can become more informed, you can become more socialized, you can become more sensitive, and in particular, the type of work that we engage in at an HBCU in the sciences, we are looking at questions that disproportionately affect people that look like us. Mm-hmm. And so I think having an understanding of what those situations are, what those social problems are, how do we engage, how do we ask the critical questions, how do we query the politicians about certain policies that may have adverse effects on the science that could affect our populations? Those are the things that we do in a liberal arts environment within the sciences. But again, it comes down, I think, to being able to ask and answer questions, and to do that from a broad perspective.
And to problem solve. I know ahead of time we were
Absolutely.
talking about this issue of problem solving.
Absolutely. So captured within that, being able to ask and answer questions, intrinsically you have to be able to think critically, and you have to be able to problem solve. And so, for us, we want students to query what we provide to them. We want them to bring their lived experiences. We want them to bring the knowledge from other classes, and then bring all of that to bear to the sciences so that we can broaden your perspective while also deepening your understanding.
So it's fair to say that this idea of, and I was talking a little bit in some of our pre-conversation, there's this book called Pastor's Quadrant, and there's this distinction that's made between basic science, kind of like solving a Rubik's Cube to say I got all the colors of the Rubik's Cube, and then in applied science, figuring out how it is that getting all of those colors are applicable in some meaningful way. So as you're talking, and I'm thinking about the bridge between what it is you've said and kind of where I'm going with you, Dr. Sarah, is that you can be a scientist who's about this narrow space of biology or a molecular organization and things like that, but how is it applied in the real world? And I think about how it is that COVID disproportionately affected people of color and who were minoritized, right? So we understand that we've got a science problem to solve, but how is it that we apply that as well? Does that make sense? Is that fair?
Absolutely, and I think, part of what we have to understand is the history of this country, particularly as it relates to healthcare for people of disadvantaged backgrounds, people who have come from enslaved populations, and thinking about what it means to trust your healthcare provider, what it means to walk into an exam room and have someone who looks like you, that level of comfort versus someone who doesn't look like you, and being able to trust the source of that information. So that engagement of individuals who look like us in basic research will then inform the applied science. So we tend to think about it more from a translational perspective, where we can see a distinct connection between what we're doing in terms of the discovery and how that can then impact lives in a real and tangible manner.
Okay. So Dr. Sarah, can you help us a little bit more? This is, from what I understand, the reason we're here is because of you, right? You had this idea. You had this idea around a liberal arts education. I'm curious, and I don't mean to pigeonhole you here, but you're being over equity, inclusion, and belonging at the college. What does that have to do with the liberal arts education? Because the way that I traditionally thought about liberal arts education is, okay, so I'm doing everything. I'm doing a little bit of everything. I'm able to think broadly and then deep about my discipline area. But what does that have to do with equity? Why is it important to look at the intersection between a liberal arts education and this all-black men's college?
So a little bit about the background about how this came about. So on any given day, we have approximately 107 HBCUs these days. And out of 107 HBCUs, there are only 22 colleges and universities that actually have any roles or offices that are dedicated to the traditional diversity, equity, and inclusion, the DEI office. Out of that 22 offices, 75%, majority I would say, 75% of them actually reside in a compliance office. When that happens, what is the basic message here? If you don't do X, Y, and Z, something bad is going to happen to you. Because compliance basically means somebody is going to come after you, right? So Morehouse is the only HBCU that actually had the foresight to decide to put this role as a critical cross-cutting college item, right? So it's not about me. I'm just a vehicle. So whoever holds this position is a cross-cutting, meaning that works with faculty, works with staff, it definitely works with students, cross-cuts the whole college. The reason why this EIB, the equity, inclusion, and belonging, is so critical to liberal arts education is that at the core of liberal arts education is your ability to problem solve, what has been said. So the critical thinking ability is right next to the equity, inclusion, and belonging. You cannot solve today's complex world problems without understanding what makes things equitable, how do we do inclusion, and how do we make sure that no one is left from the space when we are trying to create a space where people feel like they belong.
So then your assumption, what you're saying then suggests, and what all of us are saying here, it suggests that there is some responsibility that the Morehouse College goer has.
I would like to think so, but listen, it's not one of those things that everybody has to buy in. People who do not believe in it, don't do it. Mm-hmm. Don't do it, but it has to be a critical decision why you do not want to get involved with anything to do with equity, anything to do with inclusion, anything to do with belonging. It has to be a conscious decision. If you're going to do it, it has to be a conscious decision. If you're not going to do it, it has to be a conscious decision. Not because somebody told you it is BS. It's not meaningful.
So what you're saying, and I think I remember this from early on in our conversations, Provost Brown, is this idea of a liberal arts education providing tools toward liberation. I'm curious, as we talk about that, again, I want to drill down on the assumption that we're having that these scholars in this place are charged to do a type of freedom work. They're charged, no matter what their discipline is, to go out and be servant leaders that are of consequence. And I'm curious, I do want to talk about the tools, so I don't want to lose that thread, but I'm also curious about, okay, so someone like a Howard Thurman, someone like a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., someone like a Spike Lee, how is it that you think that those individuals were able to leverage the tools of a liberal arts education that allowed them to be leaders in their fields?
I think what they were able to do, and what we're asking of men of Morehouse, is to be conscious, deliberate, critical, engaged. All of that comes out from a liberal arts education, but all of that prepares everyone in this room, as well as those who came before, not only to see what is existing in front of them, but also to see what's possible, to look beyond that and to see, all right, I get it, this is what's in front of me, but I also see this. So what I've learned at Morehouse is the ability to connect those things, to communicate all of that, and to be able to bring others along as I'm engaging. So that fundamentally is about community. Mm-hmm. That is fundamentally about leadership. So when you're talking about liberal arts education, it really is about leadership, service, community. It really is about what is Morehouse's understanding of liberal arts, the critical thinking, the communication ability, the teamwork, and everything else, the problem solving that comes with it. All of that was inculcated in those who came before, just as you're having an opportunity to develop it deeply. And I want to bring up something that I think is extremely important across the comments that have been made. There is something in higher education, we talk about high impact practices. One of the high impact practices that's extremely important is called experiential learning. How many of you, by a show of hands, have had an internship? Okay, not yet, but all right. How many of you have engaged in a research experience, research assistantship, summer research, something along those lines? Okay, good number of hands. How many of you have engaged in study abroad? Whether it's short term or semester, doesn't matter. Have you studied abroad? Okay. Now, there were a lot of hands going up for all of this. All of that is experiential learning. It is taking what you learn in the classroom, that liberal arts education, and being able to apply it and being able to see how it touches down. If you haven't had that opportunity, you're going to have the opportunity, and it will deepen the education that you have so you can go out into the world and make those connections and be able to show folks different understandings of the world as they're showing you those understandings too.
So can you talk to us, and this is for anyone, I'm really thinking about you though, Dr. Hendrickson, about how it is that individuals might leverage this space and get everything they can out of a liberal arts experience. And the reason that you came to mind was, of course, your leadership of kind of supplementary programming. So I'm curious, and obviously you're over research and all this kind of stuff, right? But what are some things that students can do to make sure that they're taking full advantage of this? And I'm sorry to add extra stuff on here. How is it that they might become disabused of kind of this this popular cultural mindset that just get in, get your paper, and get out? Like if you're in medicine, you get in, you're a doctor, get that money, and get out. That's a part of me. I'm going to make some donations. I'm going to, send my kid to Morehouse College, and boom, I've contributed to society. How is it that we shake them or ourselves out of that, not just securing the bag, but ensuring that other people are able to secure substantive resources?
So I would hope that everyone is intrinsically motivated to become their better selves. And in doing that, it means that you look for opportunities to really engage. So as freshmen, you all had experiences that you would engage in service learning. I would offer that beyond the service learning is a scholarly engagement, and that's where the experiential learning comes in. There are opportunities to engage in, a plethora of ways, but I would say connect with your professors. We have an office of sponsored programs and undergraduate student training. We share information about internships, about experiential learning, about summer opportunities. And I would also offer that research is not just for those in STEM. Just this week, we received information about an opportunity at Johns Hopkins for individuals in the social sciences and the humanities, a 10-week program where you are receiving mentored research. It is a paid opportunity. So look for those types of opportunities to engage in the summers. At a liberal arts institution, you want to take the opportunity to go beyond the classroom. You want to take that opportunity to actually apply what you have learned and hopefully contribute new knowledge. And that is what these experiential learning opportunities will offer you. So engage with your professors, talk to any one of us, ask questions. Again, at a liberal arts institution, you want to learn to think critically. You want to learn to problem solve, learn how to ask and answer questions.
I want to respond to another part of what you brought up, which is there is no shame in being paid. There's no shame in that. But there's going to come a moment where you have to ask yourself, is this it? Is this the only thing that I'm really focusing on? And another thing that you're going to ask yourself is, what does that money enable me to do? You're going to ask those questions of meaning. You're going to ask questions of meaning, and you're going to ask, what about this, and what am I trying to do? When you do that, if you're not prepared and you haven't started to lay the foundation, when that moment hits you, it's going to hit you at some point. If it hasn't hit you already, that's when you need a liberal arts education. That's when you need to have had experiences that give you insight into not only being able to support yourself and others in your community and your family, but how do you nourish yourself? How do you nourish your mind? How do you nourish your spirit? In order to be able to do that, you've got to ask critical questions of yourself and the world around you, and you've got to be able to communicate. So, again, nothing wrong with being paid. Just make sure you're positioning yourself to be able to think deeply and to be able to engage in meaningful ways as well.
And that's going to allow you to be able to apply those resources in meaningful ways, at least to you, to your core self. Exactly. Dr. Sierra?
So there are two things that I think that got sparked by both of you that I want to share. So one is that, as Provost Brown was saying, there's no shame in chasing after money. There's no shame in that. But the cornerstone of equity, inclusion, and belonging, or DEI work, is this piece called equity. And equity boils down to policy changes. in order for you to have equitable something, you have to have fair procedures and practices and process. And if you have financial power, oftentimes it will get you at the table when all these policies are being made. And so if you're going to chase after money, I don't think you can actually separate yourself from this commitment to equity. Another thing is this. All of you are being trained, educated, developed into leaders. And that is part of the basis of this whole conversation about liberation. Because I don't think you can be an effective leader being an autocratic leader. In the 21st century, problem solving, you have to be, I personally believe, you have to be liberal arts minded, ethical, and empathic leader. And for that reason, inclusion is very important. And when we say leaders, I want to be very clear, we are not, at least I am not, looking for you all to become loud leaders. Some of you are blessed with your voice and the way in which you use your voice, and that is a blessing. There are so many of you who are quiet leaders. And the way you lead are different from the quote-unquote traditional mainstream leading style. There's nothing wrong with that. We need, again, diversities of how you show up and how you lead. And that is where, again, I believe liberal arts education comes to a place where it actually accentuates the beauty of unique and individual differences that reside in all of you, yet you are charged to do what it is you are supposed to do from the lens and the discipline and the framework that has prepared you.
So I want to ask you this, Dr. Sierra. One, is it possible for you to give us an example of a quiet leader? Because I think that so often what happens is we do hear the bombast, right? And nothing at all wrong with that. We need that. But we also need the complementary agent of the quiet leadership. So I'm curious about that. And then can you also talk to us, I love your language, right? I know that in conversations with you before, you talk about these constructs and concepts of excellence and also of wisdom. How do those things play into what it is that we're talking about here?
That's a hard question. I think there is a difference between knowledge and information and wisdom. I think you have to gather information which becomes part of you, then it becomes part of you and becomes your knowledge. That is far from wisdom, though. I think wisdom is something that is a culmination of everything that you have been, everything you have experienced, everything that you think about, all of your self-reflections, all those things, even things that you don't think are important, will give you the fuel to turn knowledge into wisdom. And sometimes it comes with age, but at the same time, I have to say, I have met very wise 5-year-olds. I've also met very stupid 75-year-olds. Age has nothing to do with it. Age has nothing to do with it. How much you have let those qualities or elements filter through your own life to let knowledge breathe into becoming wisdom, that is up to that person.
I want to take on the first part of what you said, really being able to understand quiet leadership versus the very loud leadership. Quiet leadership can come in a lot of different forms, but the way I've seen it play out, quiet leaders know how to listen. They know how to listen. That is an underrated skill, an overlooked skill. They can take in information, they can make connections, and they may say only one or two things in an entire meeting, but when they say it, it's like a mic drop. Everybody's like, oh, and that changes things. Quiet leaders are the ones who may not be the ones out in front, they may not be the ones who are constantly talking, but they're the ones listening, they're the ones taking it in, and often they're the ones who are key to moving things along. It's good to have quiet leaders, it's just as good to have leaders who are extroverted and who can speak. If you don't have both, you're not gonna have process and you're not gonna have depth. So quiet leaders, I think, go a long way.
I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question. So you asked for an example. And the example that I can share with you in terms of the quiet leader is something that I borrow from my dear friend Quincy, who has worked here for years as the wonderful chapel leader. And he and I had a conversation about his dissertation. And he told me that he spent a significant amount of time at the Library of Congress this past summer and doing his research and on Rustin. And he, as he was reviewing Rustin's speech and writings, he started noticing exactly which speeches by Dr. King were actually drafted by Rustin.
Wow. Yeah.
That Rustin's actual writing and his voice gave voice and a platform to Dr. King. It takes both, as Provost Brown was saying, it takes both wisdom.
I want to unpack that. I'm just going to put that out there because I think looking at Rustin is such a beautiful example, understanding the special marginalization that he experienced. So to be able to punctuate issues of and relating to the civil rights movement becomes so crucial and cornerstone. So I wanted to say that. I want to ask if there are folks who have questions, please come up to the microphone and we'll entertain those questions. I want to make sure that we're in conversation as much as possible. I felt like maybe I put a little bit too much on the title in terms of this idea of complicating our scholars' freedom work. Is it too much to say that a liberal arts education at Morehouse College, and we've kind of talked about this before, is grounded in a fundamental freedom work?
I actually think it is. If you think about the origins of our college, you had men coming together who are seeking education. That was radical. At the time it happened, that was radical. They were seeking a liberation of the mind that they often had trouble experiencing in their lived lives. Fundamentally, as we think about this liberal arts education that permeates Morehouse, that forms a foundation for Morehouse, that's the essence of it. That is freedom work. What we're doing is a freedom, a liberation from circumstances, from narrow constraints into something broader that others can be brought into. Fundamentally, it's about that. So yes, I actually don't think your title had too much in it. I just think we need to understand that connection so we know how a liberal arts education at Morehouse is supposed to work.
Thank you. Yes, sir, question?
Hello, my name is Noah Mize. I'm a freshman cinema and television major from Mableton, Georgia. An alumnus right before the year started, they told me that as my experience at Morehouse gets harder, to remember why I'm here and to remember why I'm doing what I'm doing. And my question to you all is, when things get hard for you, what is the reason why you do what you do? What is your drive to stay in the place that you are?
Wow, that's a great question.
It's a wonderful question. I'll start off and then pass the mic to my colleagues. Trust me, when I answer this way, I'm really not pandering, but I'm going to tell you the truth. All of you. All of you, seriously. When I'm in conversations about policy, when I'm having a hard conversation about, hey, is this part of the college working the way that it should? Ultimately, what it comes back to is what I'm doing going to make the lives and learning and experiences of students better? When I ask it that way, I find my motivation for why I decided to even become a professor and why I've become a provost. And that reconnects me and makes me say, okay, this is not fun, but hey, you got to get through it in order for us to really live the mission that animates Morehouse.
So Noah, that was a really great question. As Dr. Rice said in the introduction, I got my undergraduate degree at University of the Virgin Islands. And that is a U.S. territory. UVI is a historically black college. But in the sciences, I only had 2 black professors.
Wow.
And that to me was something I could not accept. As someone who grew up in a predominantly black environment, everyone around me up until that point looked like me. Everyone in a position of leadership looked like me, except when I got to college and in the STEM disciplines particularly. This was not the case in the other disciplines. And so in my mind, I made a decision to become a college professor because there were not enough professors in STEM that looked like me. Why Morehouse is, this is where God intended for me to be. It is not where I set out to be, but it's where I need to be. And as a mother of 3 sons, I firmly believe in the mission of Morehouse, and I hope that my sons can have this experience, because growing up as a black man in America, you need Morehouse.
Yeah.
And I echo your excellent question. I really appreciate it. For me, and then I shared this in last year's Crown Forum when Dr. Rice kindly invited me to the conversation. I come from a background where my grandparents are from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So between the 2 of them, each of them lost 75% of their families right away with atomic bombs. And coming from a culture where there is a strong sense of cultural trauma and historical trauma, forces you to think about something that is bigger than yourself. That there is a sense of obligation that I feel that I am supposed to use my time wisely. And what I have done up to this point in my life, 25 years or so in higher education, has prepared me to be here. And that's the reason why I'm here. And in all honesty, because of my age, I was thinking about this the other day. If I'm lucky, I have maybe 25 more summers left in me. So if you think about that, how you're going to use your time wisely, where am I supposed to be, where I'm supposed to be at. And so I agree, although our paths may not be identical, I completely resonate with Dr. Hendrickson's word that it is where I have been put.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Christian Brown, freshman engineering major from Clarksville, Tennessee. And I'm curious as to what advice you would give us about using our personal academic backgrounds and lived life experience in how we use this liberal arts education, how we go about using it in creating a space of liberation.
Thank you for that question. I think what's important for all of us, but especially for all of you, is to not divorce yourself from your background, to really embrace it but embrace it in a different way with a different lens. Look at it from the point of view of, okay, I have come up through this way, I'm appreciative of what I've experienced, or I've learned lessons from that. What have I learned? What's really important, I think, about a liberal arts education is the profound ability to reflect, to analyze, and to dig ever deeper. So as you think about your experiences, you think and reflect on what you've learned, what you're bringing here, what you have yet to learn, what you have yet to bring into your life. You have to necessarily make it all come together. So you can't just say, I'm a completely different person now that I'm here. You have to ask yourself, what is it that I learned and how can I continue to grow? And so that connection to me is absolutely essential to get the most out of your time here and everything it's going to prepare you for afterward. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Elijah Qualls. I am a freshman political science major from Columbus, Ohio. And in my experience at Morehouse so far, I have been encouraged, just like you guys are saying, to find my voice, but also to become a leader and induce change. And that can be quite intimidating. So I guess my question is, what advice do you give for myself and plenty of my brothers who are facing that intimidation, and how do you encourage us to go about this?
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. And I think imposter syndrome is a real thing. And let me be very clear that imposter syndrome is felt by so many people here right now. Some people may be better at hiding it. Some people may be better at spinning it. But not only people here, but I guarantee you some faculty even have that. So my words to you is be yourself. One of the most beautiful things about HBCUs is that what has been marginalized and it was put on the side has now moved to the center. All of you have lived and experienced that marginalization on the side up to this point. And for the reason HBCU exists, your marginalized experiences are no longer in the margin, it's now in the center. So expand yourself, find your voice, be yourself, and then be very clear. Watch where people's feet are. I mean, that's a metaphorical saying. But basically, pay attention to people's actions. Don't listen to people's words. People can say whatever they want to say and however they want to present themselves to you. But watch for their actions. Their actions are going to be speaking much louder than words. Some of them are good at giving you empty words that are loud and flashy and all of that. Don't get caught up in any of that. Develop your own voice. And you are already excellent enough.
Yeah, and I want to note the courage that it took to ask that question also is so very important. I want to be cognizant of time. We'll be here, to answer questions, but I want to make sure we get these last questions. Do you mind just introducing yourself, asking the question, you asking your question, sir, you asking yours, and then we'll try and address all of them at the end. So we got to work on our memory.
Hello,
here.
my name is Elijah Turner. I'm a senior political science major, leadership studies minor from High Point, North Carolina. And my question, you guys talked about it briefly, but doing freedom work is sometimes hard to financially support because it's not really supportive of the overall society, or it is supportive, but So my ask is more so, how do we as students begin to create more support for our humanities department for social sciences through different outlets or the network, or even just the situations and experiences and environments that we go into?
Okay, great question. Yes.
How you doing? My name is Nathaniel Giles, first year kinesiology major. I wanted to talk about like social media and how that plays into like our freedom work and like liberation per se. I want to get y'all point of view as far as like social media. Do you guys feel like we could take, let me see, with social media, do you feel like it hinders us, or do you feel like it uplifts the quote unquote movement per se?
Good question. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Cosby. I'm a junior business finance major with a minor in economics from Dallas, Texas.
Good morning.
Let me just say, this is one of the best ground forums I've been to during my time at Morehouse College. And my question for you today is, what advice would you offer to individuals who are passionate about freedom work, but are concerned about potential complications or challenges they may face along the way?
Good. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Harlem Henderson. I am a junior art history major from Chicago, Illinois. Not many people have the option to pursue a higher education to achieve their dreams, and we are actively being parts of history as we speak, just being students at Morehouse College. So please tell me, how can we better appreciate our positions of power? Because being so close to the situation sometimes,
Wow.
it can be easy for us to forget, especially with all of the distractions that are made available to us and us being so young.
Thank you.
God, oh. All right, y'all go ahead and handle it.
Beautiful questions. Thank you so much. Beautiful questions.
Wow, that last one in particular. You know what strikes me about that question, and I'm also going to weave in the social media question as well. It's easy for us to simply be in a moment. It's easy for us to think about where we are and to not always connect it to larger things. Honestly, the fact that y'all are all here, someone helped that to happen. Either immediately or generationally, they enabled that to happen. There's a level of gratitude that I feel. I'm a first-generation college student. I'm also one of the first folks in my family who's gotten a doctorate degree. I am aware of that, and I'm aware of the sacrifices that went into enabling that to happen. We have to hold on to that because otherwise arrogance is too easy to set in. And we don't need more arrogant folks out in the world. We got enough already. We need folks who are going to appreciate where they are, what they're capable of doing, the privileges that they have, so that they can use them to enable others to feel empowered. Taking that now to social media, my feeling about social media is that it very infrequently allows for a middle ground. Usually there's an amplification of voices that can be for good and it can be for pretty bad too. So for those of us who are interested in social justice, equity, trying to provide opportunities, trying to provide community, how do we enable our voices to be heard amongst the positive sides of what social media allows and counter what is very negative in many different places? So pulling all that together, you have to think about where it is you've come from, how do you use your voice, and what are you about? And how are you going to stand up and be accounted for when people ask you tough questions and they ask, hey, you know what, you benefited from this, but I don't see you doing anything. How are you going to respond? That to me is how I weave those together, and I think it's important.
So I was trying to think of one answer to all four questions, and I don't think I succeeded. But I'll just share that in terms of being here, absolutely, this is a privileged opportunity, earned to be sure, but you also have a responsibility to share your story. And we talk about the fact that we do a lot of great work at HBCUs, but I don't think there is enough national awareness of what a treasure we are. And so it is incumbent on you to use social media in a responsible way to share your story so that others can see what's happening. And as a consequence, that can bring in additional resources to actually help those who may not have the resources to access opportunities. And so as we share our stories, we want to think about being our authentic selves, sharing our lived experiences, because there are others who are not as fortunate to be here, may have had the same background, but something changed along the path. And then also, I think we have a responsibility to create opportunities for those who are coming behind.
That's right.
And so as you are developing as servant leaders, you want to think about that engagement. What is the legacy that you are going to leave having had this liberal arts experience, this great education, this opportunity for training? What will your legacy to Morehouse be?
That was pretty good.
How am I supposed to follow those two? I don't know, but I would do my best. I think the conversations about the financial burden is a real one. And it is not just for this college, but it is nationwide. Education is getting more and more expensive, more and more expensive. And it is put upon people like Provost Brown and President Thomas to do their jobs, to get the resources, and then change the infrastructure so that there will be less burden on you. But it's a hard process to go through. And I think when it comes down to other questions that were raised, it all boils down to, I think, what Provost Brown was saying earlier. You have to be able to listen. So if you're going to lead, and if you're going to do the freedom work, don't be always the one who's going to be at the forefront and get burned. It's okay to take the back seat sometimes. Let people go forward, and then you take a little bit of respite. But you have to be able to listen to not only other people, but yourselves. Because we can't afford freedom workers who are exhausted and who are not going to be in it for the rest of our life. This is a lifelong commitment. It's not a one-off. It is not just for one moment in our lives. So going back to what you were talking about and what you were asking about, how do we keep on listening to ourselves in our communities and our people around us to make sure what we have is indeed precious? I'm telling you, I've been in higher education for a quarter of a century. There's no place like here. I've never seen anything like this. Nothing like this. And so how do we treasure that while you are here for 4 years, but not think that you can take this for granted? That is, I think, is a constant daily struggle and reminder, and you all have to be accountable for each other for not forgetting it.
Dr. Sarah, Associate Provost Hendrickson, Provost Brown, thank you so much for being in conversation with us today.